Hey, everybody. I'm here with Steve Kaplan. How you doing, Steve?
Doing just great, thank you. I wish I was in sunny California, but there we go. I'm in rainy London instead.
Yeah, 82, 84 degrees here. But yeah, so it looks like people are starting to come in. So as a reminder, let me remind everyone to let us know where you are watching from. Welcome, everybody. I see that we have Michelle from Oregon. We got a Facebook user. So let me take this time to also remind you to please give StreamYard permission. Show your name and profile pics, so I'll be able to credit you when you comment or ask questions. That's right underneath the live, the link, streamyard.com/Facebook. Just click that, give permission, and then I'm not sure if you have to go back to the group or not. But
I'd like to say hi to Vivica from New Zealand. Vivica is
yes.
on my she's in my Facebook forum, my Photoshop forum rather.
Excellent. So, Vivica from New Zealand.
Make it probably some god awful time of day in New Zealand. So thank you for staying up. Or
quite the dedication, right? Quite the
yeah.
And we got Osvaldo, who's one of my moderators. Thank you for being here from Los Angeles. He always makes sure that no one spams the comment section too. So thank you for that, Osvaldo. Excellent. And we got Bob Stein from sunny San Mateo, California. Good to see you here, Bob. So
where is San Mateo? I haven't heard of San Mateo. Should I know it?
So Bob, San Mateo that's north of Los Angeles, correct? How close is that to, like, say, San Francisco? And once again, let us know where everyone is watching from. See, and we also have some from the UK. Joss Verde from the Midlands. Andrew Nichols from the UK. How you doing, Andrew? Good to see you here. And let's see. Bob says it's 17 miles south of San Francisco. Yeah, I thought it was kind of close. And Michelle says, yeah, near San Francisco. So, yep, great. So do let us know where everyone is watching from. Glad to see everyone coming here. Looks like the numbers are building up.
Christy is excited from this topic. I'm really pleased because it's such an interesting topic we've got tonight. Yeah, we got it's one of those things so few Photoshop users know about.
Yeah, exactly. Dave Cross is a fan of it, but we got Jason from Vancouver, Canada, and Stephen from Prescott, Arizona. Someone from Oklahoma City. Great. And so
Oklahoma City is actually in Oklahoma, isn't it? Because there's one, isn't it? Something like Kansas City is not in Kansas.
Oklahoma City. I'm not even quite sure on that one, but we got Beverly from Beverly Hills. I know Beverly.
I really hope Beverly's surname is Hills. Wouldn't that be good?
Beverly Hills from Beverly Hills. So yeah, once again, please give StreamYard permission to show your name and profiles so I can give you credit when I click on your comments. And yes, it is in Oklahoma. So, yep, good.
Great.
We got Andy McGuire from Ireland. Hey, guys, cool. And Abdel from Egypt. Nice. Quite the international group here. Stephen says part of Kansas City is in Kansas, part in Missouri. Yeah.
That must be confusing. How could you have a city that's in two different states?
You got to vote twice.
I guess you have.
Okay, cool. Great. We're colorful today. I got my new blue lights. You got your purple lights here.
Yeah. Nice. I should have coordinated and put blue in, shouldn't I?
No, I like it. It's a nice balance. So, okay. So, so Stephen says a river separates them. Yeah.
So a bit like Budapest then.
Yeah. So, Steve, do you want to introduce yourself? Let people know about you.
Yeah, hi. I'm Steve Kaplan. I am a Photoshop artist, and I for something like 30 years I've been doing satirical Photoshop illustrations for newspapers and magazines around the world. And I have a YouTube channel, 2 Minute Photoshop, which I started for my son, who's in his 20s and can't concentrate on anything for more than 2 minutes at a time. So bite-sized Photoshop tutorials that cover the essential stuff that you need to know. There is one on smart objects, but you can't fill as much in 2 minutes as you can in the hour that I've got tonight. So I'm really looking forward to getting into smart objects and really going through them in a big way, because you're going to be knocked out by this. There is so much that you can do.
Fantastic. Great. And did you have like some slides that you wanted to share of your work, or?
Yeah, I would have done if I'd had time to get them together, but I didn't have time to get them together. So
I guess you.
So I didn't. But if you want to go to photoshop.london,
Right.
you can see a load of my stuff on there.
Right. So that's photoshop.london, just like it sounds.
You're very slick with your sliding in little captions.
You like that?
Most impressive, yeah.
I like the fact that you can now, instead of like .com, you can say .london. That's quite nice. Do you know when they've started to have kind of territorial URLs like that? That's kind of nice.
I actually bought this one about 6-7 years ago. There was talk of Adobe doing a Photoshop conference in London.
Nice.
And I just sort of looked, found it was available and bought it and sat on it. And then when I thought of my YouTube channel, a lot of people said, hey, you sound just like David Attenborough. And of course, I don't sound anything just like David Attenborough. I've got a similar kind of accent. So I thought, okay, well, I'll play on the London accent angle of it. And so I've moved everything onto there. And I've used the Photoshop of London to bring together a load of my sort of Photoshop stuff from around the internet.
Yeah, perfect for when you have events like you're presenting in London as well. So I mean, but it's catchy. It's nice to see like a location like that as opposed to just .com.
Andrew Nichols here has just said there are two Birminghams, one in the US and one in the UK.
That's right.
And there was a big scandal a couple of years ago when Birmingham in the UK, the local council, put out a poster all about the delights of Birmingham with a photograph of Birmingham, Alabama. Because they Googled Birmingham, they thought, that's a nice picture. We'll use that one.
We'll just throw that in. That's funny. Okay, great. So shall we jump right into Photoshop?
Yep, let's do that.
So have you hide your browser. There we go. And I'll go into the full screen view. Okay. And then once you open up an image, I believe your layers panel will be, yep, there it is.
There we go. You can see everything okay?
Yep. Looks like a guy in a suit sitting down.
It's a guy in a suit. And it's just a regular layer. And he's cut out, as you can see. And so what I'm going to start off by doing is saying, well, what exactly are smart objects? So here's a very quick demo. I'm going to take this layer and move a copy of it. And I'm going to turn the copy into a smart object. I'll go to the layer menu and choose Smart Objects, Convert to Smart Object. And right away, well, actually, you can't see any difference at all. The only thing you can see difference is that there's a little badge on the duplicate that shows that it's a smart object. You can see that on the layers panel there. So what is the point of smart objects? Well, I'm going to select both of these layers. And I'm going to go into Free Transform and shrink them down and maybe rotate them a little bit. And I'll say, yep, that's where I want these guys. And this is a kind of extreme example of the sort of thing that I do every day when I'm doing photo montages. I've got a layer. I don't know how big I want it. I don't know what angle I want it. I want to rotate it. So this is an extreme example of that. And then I'm going to come back to this, the next day or the next week or the next month and think, actually, I want this guy bigger. So let's use Free Transform again and let's make it bigger back to its original size, rotate it back, and I'll hit enter to apply that. So here's the difference. On the left is the regular layer. And when we reduced it, we chopped out all of the pixels that you couldn't see. So the pixel, it was a much, much smaller image, far fewer pixels. When we blow it up again, you can see it's now completely unusable, absolutely a degraded image. And this is, as I say, extreme example, but even if you're making small changes, each time you scale, each time you rotate a layer, you are going to be losing quality. The smart object doesn't do that because it encapsulates the whole of the original layer within the smart object. You can rotate it, you can scale it, you can distort it as much as you want, and you never lose the quality of the original. So that is the key reason why if you've got a montage and you want to know what size you want something, make it a smart object first, and then you can distort it whatever you want, and you won't lose the quality. Now I'm just going to undo a couple of times to step back to the original there, and I'll show you another difference of smart objects. So on this guy, I'm going to go to the color replacement tool, and I'm going to pick a blue, and I'm just going to recolor his shirt in that blue. It's his tie rather. And you can do that very easily, it just takes a second, and you can get that the color you want. When I try to do that on the smart object, I get this warning. Smart object must be rasterized before proceeding, and edit the contents will no longer be available. Do you want to rasterize it? No, I don't. Rasterizing it means turning it into a regular layer. So I'm going to cancel that. You cannot paint directly on smart objects. So that is the one drawback. Instead, if you double click it in the layers panel, it opens the new window. And you can see the new window is bounded just to the edges of that original layer. So here I can, for example, go for the quick selection tool. I can select his tie in here, just take off that bit of the shirt I don't want. And rather than repainting it, I can add an adjustment layer. So let's go for a hue and saturation adjustment layer. And now I can have that eddy color I want. So I'll do that. What's interesting here is we've created a new layer inside the smart object. It's an adjustment layer. It could be any other kind of layer. If I now close this smart object, I get a dialog saying, do I want to save it? Yes, I do. And when I save it, there it is back, appearing in Photoshop as if it was just a single individual layer, even though it contains the adjustment layer that we made earlier. So this is a really key thing about smart objects. They can contain multiple layers. There's your basic introduction. Does that all make sense to everyone? I can't see anyone saying no, so I'll assume people are kind of saying yes.
Yeah, looks great.
That's good so far. Okay, let me show you some more interesting stuff. So I'm going to put this one away, and let me open up. Here we go. This image here. So it's a stock image of a guy reading a magazine, and what I've actually done is I have copied the magazine to a separate layer, just so that I can work on it individually, rather have that as a mask, as we'll see. I've also got several extra layers that I put into this document, which is a background, a banner at the top, a title, and a headline. So I have built a magazine cover within this document. And so there's, as you can see, these are 4 separate layers. I'm going to select all of those layers and make those into a smart object. So I go to Layer, Smart Objects, Convert to Smart Objects. And you can see it now appears as a single layer. And by default, it takes the topmost layer and gives that the name of the smart object. We can, of course, rename that to anything we like. Let's call it magazine. So what I'm going to do now is distort this so that it fits on the cover of the magazine. First of all, I want to make a clipping mask of that cover that I cut out earlier. And I can do that in several ways. I can go to Layer and create clipping mask. I can also hold down Option on a Mac, Alt on a PC, and click between those two in the Layers panel. And when I do that, it's visible only where it overlaps the layer beneath. So you can only see the magazine on top of that original cover. So let's go into Free Transform. I'm going to start by rotating it around to get that spine lined up. Let's make it smaller. And that, I think, is about the right kind of angle for that. And now I'm going to flip into Image Warp, which we do by pressing this button up on the options bar. And now I can grab any of these handles and I can move them down into place. And you can see that because we're using the magazine cover underneath as a clipping mask, we're only seeing it where it overlaps that. And we can just adjust these handles. There we go. I can make this follow the shape of that cover. You pull this down a little bit there and bring it up at the bottom so it follows the shape. And there we go. And I hit enter and it applies that. So we've got our cover as a single object, single layer mapped onto our magazine cover. To make it look a bit more realistic, let's add a new layer and we'll call this one Shadow. And I'll switch to my regular brush tool. Let's go for a soft edged brush, paint in black, and I'll just paint at a low opacity. Let's move that underneath. No, in fact, let's make a clipping mask with that magazine as well. So we just have a little bit of shadow on there and it just adds a little bit more realism. So, interesting thing now, if I go back on the magazine and I go back into Free Transform with a regular layer, if you go back into Free Transform a second time, you will see just a rectangular selection box around the whole thing. With Free Transform, I go back into Free Transform with the smart object, and you can see that is the rotation that I applied. When I go back into Image Warp, there are the handles exactly as I left them. So you can carry on manipulating this. I can distort it until I get exactly the shape that I want. And that's a really big advantage. If you want to now edit the cover of this magazine, well, you just double click the smart object in the Layers panel and it opens in its own window. And there are all the layers that we used to make this. So let me add a file to this. I'm going to open up my, let's find this picture of the Mona Lisa. I think that's a good one to use on here. Here we go. So I'm going to select all, copy, close this window, and now paste it into here. And in fact, let's add a little mask on here. Actually, I did that earlier. Let's do that again, just so I can paint to make her head just stick up above the masthead of the magazine, which just looks a little bit nicer. There we go. And I can change the text so it doesn't say Laughing Cavalier, it says Mona Lisa. And we can maybe go onto that masthead there and change the color of that. Let's flip that around. There we go, that's a little bit nicer. And now, when we save this smart object, well, you can either just save it directly from the Save menu as you would any other Photoshop document, or you can just close it and it'll prompt you to save. And there is that magazine with all the distortions that we applied to it now back in place on top of that magazine dummy underneath. So what this means is that you can do a really complex distortion that might take you, several minutes or half an hour or so to do. Once you've done it, then you can just swap out the contents for anything you like. And this is such a powerful thing to be able to do. It makes it really easy to create complex montages in a very short time.
Steve?
Yeah?
Do you want to hear a nice compliment?
Go ahead. I always like to hear a nice compliment.
Andrea says, "This is so good. I just tried to rewind it during the live."
Mm.
And let us also give a shout out to Andrea. It's her birthday. So happy birthday, Andrea.
Happy birthday.
See you.
Well, if she wants to send us in a photograph of herself, we can stick her on a magazine cover. It'll take seconds.
Great.
Good. So let me put this one away. I will show you something else with smart objects. So let's say, it's working with multiple smart objects. So I'm going to open up this image, and it's just a photograph I took of an art gallery in which I cut out all of the pictures from the frames. Here is the Mona Lisa again. I have already turned this image into a smart object. So what I'm going to do is drag it behind the background layer, and I'm going to move it over, and I'm going to use free transform to shrink it down and make it fit inside this frame. Obviously, we wanted to be in the right perspective. So to do that, you just hold Command on a Mac, Control on a PC, and grab one of the corner handles. And now you can drag that to its correct location. Actually, let's move this one down. And there she is in more or less the right kind of perspective for this scene. And let's add a filter to this. And I think I'm going to go for, let me see, I suppose the oil paint filter. That would seem appropriate for the Mona Lisa. Let's apply that. There we go. I think Leonardo is probably turning in his grave at the moment, but it just gives the kind of effect that we want on this. And there it is, that's applied. I want to fill the whole of this gallery with Mona Lisas. So I'm going to take this one. To make a copy of a layer, as you know, shortcut with the Move tool selected, just hold down the Option or Alt key and you drag to make that copy. And let's make this one a little bit smaller. We get this dialog saying, while you're using free transform, then you're not going to see the smart filters while you're doing it. That's fine. Don't show it again. I've got it. And we can just make this a little bit smaller and put it down there. So we've applied the smart filter, the oil paint, to it. Because it's a smart object, it's also a smart filter. And what that means is I can turn it on and off. Or I can open up that filter and I can change the way that it works. I can also add a new filter. So let's go ahead and let's this time use, I think let's try the color halftone. And just going to go for the default values, put that on the top, and you get this kind of pop art effect. You can see in the layers panel, we've got the color halftone on top of the oil paint, which means oil paint filter applied first, color halftone on top. I can pick that up and I can drag it so it comes before the oil paint filter. Now you've got the color halftone and you've got the oil paint filter applied on top of it. So you can do multiple filters, and if you don't like the way they look, rather than just thinking, oh, I've got to start again, as you would with any regular Photoshop layer, you can just edit the way the filter looks. You can turn them on or off as you choose, and you can endlessly go back and change your mind. So I've already filled the rest of this gallery with pictures of the Mona Lisa. These are copies of the same original smart object, and that's kind of crucial here. And I've applied a different filter to each one. None of them, admittedly, a great improvement on the original, but it's enough to kind of give the idea of what we're talking about. Here's the really clever part. I can open any one of these smart objects and it opens in a new window. I can open a new file. Let's go for our Laughing Cavalier again. And I'm going to select all, copy, put him away, and paste him into this image. And you can see we've got two layers now in the smart objects. There is a Mona Lisa. Don't need to get rid of her. I'm just putting him on top. When I now close this window, I hit save, and instantly all of those copies of the Mona Lisa in this gallery are replaced by our Laughing Cavalier. More importantly, they all have those filters applied to them. And you can see in the oil paint filter particularly, how the oil paint follows the contours of the original image. Well, now it's following the contours of the Laughing Cavalier image. So the really cool thing here is that all these smart objects are linked together. That means if you change one of them, you change all of them. And that just gives you a huge amount of flexibility. It allows you to populate artwork with multiple copies. You change one and you change them all.
So, Steve, I just sent you a message with an image that Andrea sent me. So since it's your birthday, do you want to put it in that vertical frame on the left side?
Absolutely.
So,
how do I go that?
Your Facebook Messenger.
Back into Messenger. Okay. Very cute. Okay, so I'll drag this into Photoshop.
There
we go. Select all.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Mona. And let's put her in. Let's put her in here. I'm going to actually make a new layer and fill that with white. And let's save it. Let's go back to our gallery. Hey, there we go.
Oh, that's so
gallery
cool.
Full of her. That's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, I love the fact that it populates every single one, not just like one, but like the whole series. That's great. Quite
That's
creative.
the really cool thing, that all of these smart objects are linked together. Change one and you change all of them. And I'll give you a really good example of why you might want to do that.
I think you made Andrea's birthday too. It's quite nice, right?
And for Andrea's birthday, absolutely. And in fact, let's open this one up again. And let me put in happy birthday, Andrea. Bring it to the front. Let's have this in something nice and bold so we can read it, and maybe centered. And let's have that in a nice bright pink. So I'll stretch that out. Now it was cutting off a little bit low there, so I can make sure it's above her knees, and maybe put a little bit of a outer glow on there, just so we can read it more clearly. There we go. When I now save this, we'll go back into our gallery, and there it is. But note how the text is now coming out in perspective across our image, and there it is on all of them. And because it's a smart object, at any point we can go back into it, we can change it, we can change our minds. It gives you so much flexibility. You never need to commit to any idea again.
And I think you made her birthday. She says birthday made 2021. So you made it special. Cool.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, I will save this as a JPEG. It's saving it as a ping, don't worry about that. And I will send it to you after the show, Andrew, and you can forward it on to her.
Great.
Excellent. Andrea, thank you very much for that. That made it really clear. Good. So here's another example of why you want to do that. So let's say you're designing a company logo, and you want to give them an idea of how it's going to look in various different applications. So I brought it in here. I've made it, applied it to a business card, to a keychain, and to the side of this mug. One thing to note with something like the one on the side of the mug, first of all, I've set the mode of all these layers to multiply. On normal, it never is going to look right. Multiply means it picks up the shading that's on the mug underneath, and it looks that much more real. If we go into free transform and have a look at the image warp, you can see how I distorted this to fit the shape of the mug. In fact, I could pull that in a little bit more. And because it's a smart object, again, if I got it wrong the first time, I can easily go back and fix it. Now, what's interesting about this logo is I didn't create it in Photoshop. I created it in Illustrator, and I placed it into Photoshop using File, Place Linked. And that means it's still linked to the original Illustrator artwork. If I double click any one of these smart objects, it opens the new window. And you can see here, that little chain icon in the layers panel means this is linked to the original Illustrator artwork. So if I double click this, it opens it in Illustrator. And now I can come in here and I can change this to a different font, make that a little bit smaller. And I can change the color of the background there. And I can change the color of this text, anything I want to do. And when I now save this out of Illustrator, I go back into Photoshop. There's the saved version, ported straight from Illustrator into our smart object. When I close this smart object and save it, there it is in place on our artwork. So again, so useful to be able to create a piece of art like this, change your mind, and swap out the contents absolutely instantly without having to do any more work on it.
And
really useful.
And Stephen makes a comment about love the theatrical reference, and I was just laughing at that too. Sweeney Todd.
I have no idea. I was just thinking of something based in London, and he was the first guy who popped into my head.
Right.
So let's put this one away. Okay. Simple one here. If you've got a piece of text and I want to make this text fit onto that wall, you can go into free transform, but in free transform, what you can't do is do that live distortion. You can share it on text, but you can't produce the kind of distortion that you want. It simply won't allow you to do that with live text. So what you do instead, and you're probably guessing this already, is you make it into a smart object. Now, when I go into free transform, I can make this text fit along this wall by grabbing those handles, and all I'm doing is aligning the guidelines to match the courses of bricks. And there we go. There's our text fitting actually perfectly in perspective on this wall.
It's so satisfying to see how you do it so quickly and easily.
It really is very easy to do. Let's say we want to add a stroke onto this. Well, we can just go to the effects and we can pick a stroke and we can add it onto here. The trouble is, it's an even stroke all the way around. So the thickness on the left is the same as the thickness on the right. But if you look at the text, obviously because the text is going in perspective, that stroke has to go in perspective as well. So instead, what we can do is open up our smart object and apply the stroke to it here. And we want an outer stroke because with text, if you make the stroke inside, you get this sort of ugly effect. It makes the text look really ungainly. So always put it outside your text. And of course, it's now being clipped off by the edge of the canvas. Simple solution, just use free transform, make it a little bit smaller so it now fits within the canvas. When we now close this and save it, there is our stroke in perspective along with the rest of our text. So if you ever want to put text in perspective, you don't have to rasterize it first, make it a smart object, and then you can wrap it into any shape you want, and you can not only get the perspective that you want, you can then also go back and edit the text. I could change the wording, I could change the font, I could change the color, whatever you want to do to it. Again,
Right.
you never need to commit.
And Andrea says, my students are going to love adding their logos to actual products. I'm going to add more in-depth smart objects to my course.
Excellent. Delighted to hear it. But wait, there's more.
Sweet.
Let's have a look at here's a rather cute little thing. So
real quick, Bob asks, what did you do to show the bricks through the text? And I believe
just
it was a
changed the
layer blending
mode
mode.
of the text. Let me just open that up again. I just changed the mode of it from normal to overlay.
Great.
Normally, I would use something like multiply for this, but that can make it a bit too dark. So they're just different ways of viewing the underlying layer through the current layer. And it is, if you haven't played around with all these different modes, it is absolutely worth doing, because you can get some really spectacular effects this way.
And then Michelle asks, can you discuss the difference between just duplicating a smart object layer and copy via smart object?
No, it's the same thing. You duplicate a smart object or you copy it, it's going to always give you the same effect.
Okay.
Yep, I think. Okay. Anything else?
No, I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay. So here is a hand holding a picture frame, and I want to make one of these recursive pictures where it keeps on disappearing endlessly into the distance. So the first thing I'm going to do is duplicate this layer. Yep.
Sorry. Michelle is trying to distinguish it. She's saying there's a way that they are not linked. So I guess there's a way that you would copy or duplicate a smart object where it's not linked, and there's another way that it would be linked. And she's just wondering, there's a way.
Right. Sorry, I misunderstood. Yes. Let me show you. I'm going to make a quick new layer on here. Let's make a circle and fill it with pink. So I'm going to turn this into a smart object, and if I just pick it up and drag it, then it makes a linked copy of it. What you're saying is, and where's it gone? Where's it gone? There is a copy. I can't remember where it's gone. Do you happen to recall?
What is it you're looking for the maybe under edit? Edit copy?
New smart object via copy.
Okay, yeah. Right.
And if I change one of these to a different color and save it, then when you just duplicate it by dragging, it's linked to the original. When you use duplicate smart object via copy, which you do by control clicking or right clicking on the layer name, then it makes a duplicate of the smart object that is not linked to the original. And there are many times when you might want to do this. So it's a really good question, and thanks for asking that, because I forgot to mention it. Great. So you see the difference. This is the original. This is the one where I just Option or Alt dragged it, and this is the one where I did the copy from this pop-up menu here.
And Michelle says thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for asking that. As I said, I would have forgotten that. So what I'm going to do here is duplicate this background layer, made a copy of that. I'm going to use the magic wand tool to select the space inside the frame and I'm going to make a layer mask. And the layer mask, I'm going to do just reveal selection. So this layer is only visible inside that mask. If I hide the background, all you can see is a blank canvas. What I'm going to do is rotate this layer, and I only want it visible inside that mask. So if I unclick that chain, or if I click that chain, the chain disappears. And that means I can transform the layer and the mask independently. When I now go into free transform, you can see I'm transforming the layer, but the mask is not being transformed because I took that chain off. And I'm going to rotate that round a little bit, make it smaller, and bring it down just like that. So we've got a copy inside there. And what I want to do is to build an endless series of these going off into infinity. And you might think this would be a laborious task. Actually, it's surprisingly straightforward. All I do is select all, and I'm going to do a merged copy. So copy merge, shortcut Shift Command C on a Mac, Shift Control C on a PC, and that copies the whole canvas as if it were a single layer. When I now double click, oh, you know what? I did turn it into a smart object first. I didn't turn it into a smart object first. Let me go back. Layer, smart object. I'm sure everyone's sitting there thinking, it's all about smart objects. Why didn't you make it a smart object? I didn't make it a smart object. I can still
It's fine.
select that and make my layer mask here. Right, and do that transform again. Because I've already done the transform once, I can just repeat that, Shift Command T, Shift Control T on a PC repeats the last transformation. If you didn't know that, very handy shortcut to learn. So once again, Command A or Control A, select all. Shift Command C or Shift Control C, merged copy. Open the smart object and paste. I'm going to save the smart object, go back to the original. There's the smart object inside the frame. It's already all selected. Merged copy, back to the smart object, paste, save, back to the original, copy, paste, save, and so on. And you can just keep on doing this.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool.
As many times as you like until you can no longer see the little white square in the middle. But I will stop there. So a really quick way of producing this sort of endlessly recursive image, and it is a lot less painful than having to do each one individually. Really, really quick and easy technique. It's fun. It's not something you're going to do every day. I'll admit that.
That's cool though.
It is
cool.
It's fun. Good. Let's put that one away. I'd also like to talk about smart filters, which we talked about, very briefly, but actually there's some really cool stuff here as well. So as I said earlier, I spent a lot of my working life doing photo montage illustrations for newspapers, and when there were stories about the stock market, about shares, about anything to do with chance, then there are one of two things that art editors on newspapers would always ask for. They would either say, can you do a bunch of people playing poker and they've got a deck of cards, and the cards that you can see in their hand have got the logos of banks on, or the logos of Dow Jones companies. I think I must have done a dozen different illustrations for the same newspaper of a hand of cards. The other thing that they go for is a roulette wheel. And when the roulette wheel is static, it's okay, it's a little bit dull, much better if it's spinning. Previously, in Photoshop, to make a wheel like this spin, you'd have to copy it to a new document, undistort it to make a circle, then use the radial blur, then bring it back in here, then distort it again to match the original. It was a real nightmare. With the latest blur gallery filters in Photoshop and with smart objects, It's a much, much easier thing to do. So what I'm going to do is take this layer and make it into a smart object. Smart objects and convert smart object. And there we go. Once again, you see no difference. I'm going to go up to the filter menu and I'm going to use blur gallery and go for spin blur. I don't know if you've had a look at this. It's an extraordinarily clever filter. Start off by picking up that midpoint, and I'm going to move that over to the base of this column, or close to the base. You can grab the outer little handles, little white dots, and you can use those to change the shape. And you can get, this is amazing, an elliptical blur, which I think is really, really clever. And I'm going to grab these ones as well, move them up to the top there. And we were actually a little bit higher, so I make sure I get the bottom in place. Let's move this down a little. This is you can see it's going a little bit slowly here because this is a very, very processor intensive task. So I've got the outer part of this pretty much where I want it. Let's drag it down a little bit more. We're still missing a little bit of blur here, and that's because these inner little white dots control the feather, the amount of fade between the blur effect and the no blur effect outside it. So I can drag that right up to the edge, and that looks pretty good. If that's too much of a blur, well, you can just bring the angle down, and that changes the amount of that blur. And that's pretty good. If you want, you can add this strobe effect, so you can get a sort of juddering of these numbers as they go round.
Cool.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's not bad. Let's go for something like that. I think that's quite good. Now, because it's a smart object, of course, I don't need to commit to this at this point. I can say, yep, we'll do that. That looks fine. Let's try it and see what happens. So I can just hit OK and apply that. Not only is this editable, but every time you create a filter on a smart object, that filter has a layer mask with it, or rather a filter mask. That means I can switch to the brush tool, go onto the mask, and as with any mask where you paint in black, you will hide a layer. Here, when I paint in black, I am hiding the filter. So first of all, I'll do very roughly around it, just so I can reveal the whole of this column in the middle. And then I can go and refine this. Let's put a little bit of softness on there. When you paint in white, you reveal it again. The X key swaps between black and white. Very, very useful if you're using layer masks. And now I can just paint the effect back in, and I can go right up to that edge. And it means that we can do in just a couple of minutes something that would previously have taken, literally an hour to achieve. And I think the fact that you can now selectively apply your filters is just absolutely amazing. It always used to be that you'd have a complex filter in Photoshop. You'd apply it. If it wasn't right, you'd have to undo it, particularly with the spin filters or the spin blur filter. You just have to guess. And if it wasn't right, you'd have to just try it again. So I think being able to do this in such a short time, let's see if we can just get that.
Yeah, it looks great.
Come out there.
And then Osvaldo asks, any advantage on using the mask provided versus creating a new one?
Yeah, because the mask here masks the filter and not the layer. So if I add a layer mask to here, then yeah, I can go ahead and I can paint on this, and this will hide the layer. The mask that comes with the filter masks just the filter effect and not the layer.
Good point. Yep.
Yep. Any more questions about this?
No, just
No.
Andrea says, "What?"
Yeah,
It's pretty
exactly.
cool. Yeah, pretty
It's
cool.
really cool, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
it's nice.
really cool stuff. And I really like the fact that you can do this, and the fact that you can then double click it and say, actually, let me go for, hang on, where's our filter? Maybe I have to disable the mask first. Yeah, oh no, this is what I want. I can double click the smart filter in the layers panel. There we go, and it opens up that filter again exactly as I left it. So if I show this to the art editor of the magazine and he says, "Oh, I don't like all that juddering on the numbers," I say, "Okay, fine. I'll just take off that strobing on the number, just give you that that bit of blur that you wanted instead. And if you want a little bit less blur, I can give you that." It's taking a while. There we go. It's catching up with us. And when I say OK, it saves it back into our Photoshop file, still with that mask intact on there.
Right.
So
And Andrew Nichols, can you
Hmm.
add another mask to the smart layer?
um,
I think you would just add to the mask as opposed to adding another mask, correct? Right.
Why would you want to add another mask onto the filter? If you have multiple filters, you only have one mask for all of the smart filters.
That probably answers it. Yeah.
Yep. I think that may be a question. What you can do, let's say you look at this and think about, okay, that is now, blurring correctly, but there should be a little bit of blur on here. Surely this is spinning around as well. Well, what we can do is duplicate this layer. Let's hide that blur on there. Invert this mask. So let me think. Now, tell you what, I'm going to copy that mask onto. If I select or copy that and paste that onto our new layer. Come on. No.
Someone was saying you could put it in a folder, then add a mask to that folder.
Oh, well, absolutely you can. Yes. Yeah, make a new layer group, and you can add a mask to that, or you could add in nested smart objects. So you can take this smart object and convert this into a smart object. And now this is a smart object, and inside this smart object is the smart object that we started with. So yeah, this is quite a good way of having multiple masks in a layer.
Great.
Good. And finally, let me just show you this, because this is something going back to the similar idea of the magazine that we started with. So what I've got here is a paint can. Actually, I started with just a picture of a paint can, and I drew a brush and the drips on top of that, and I drew a label, and I drew my own shading on the label, and I painted on here the shadows of the drips and of the paintbrush. On top of that, I added a smart object, and this smart object, if I go into free transform, you can see I did this with image warp, and I made the shape of it follow the shape of the can. And the reason why I did this earlier and didn't do this live is it took actually quite a long time to get all of these handles in the right place. So because it's quite a tricky perspective, we're looking down on the paint can, it's wrapping around the edges. It took a while to make it all happen. And I always prefer to do this with just a rectangular, regular grid, so you can see exactly what you're doing. You can see how the perspective is working. If I open this up, I can now add in, whatever artwork I want here. So I've got multiple layers inside this smart object. When I save it and go back to the original, then there is our label correctly wrapping around this can. And look at the way the perspective works, on these colored squares, how they just wrap around this beautifully. Again, the mode of this is set to multiply. If it's normal, it looks completely flat, completely phony. On multiply, multiply mode darkens whatever's underneath. Whatever's underneath in this case is mainly white, but with that shading. And when you put this on top, then you get that extra darkening effect. And of course, you can change what's on here to anything you like at any point. And it makes it so easy, once you've created your complex transformation, just to go back and change it and change your mind. And the thing that I'm always banging on about in Photoshop is always leave yourself wiggle room. Always give yourself space to change your mind later, because what you do today may not be what you want tomorrow.
Good point. Good point.
Have we got time for one final thing?
Sure. And Andrea says blend modes are the magical unicorns of Photoshop.
Wow. Having a good birthday there, Andrea. That's really cool. No, magical unicorns, yeah, except they actually exist, unlike real unicorns. So I've got an alien that I've stuck onto this background, and I want to make him look like he's beaming down onto this planet. So once again, layer, smart objects, convert to smart objects, and I'm going to apply a couple of filters here. I'm going to start off with, let's go for a bit of a pointillized filter. There we go. And I think I'm going to go for a bit of a motion blur filter on top of that. And I want the blur to be vertical, and let's have it going straight down like that. There we go. And you think, well, maybe actually the pointillage should come on top of the motion blur. Let's try that. No, I preferred it beneath. Let's put it back underneath. You've got the room to change your mind. I think that's the key thing. But to have him beaming down, we of course don't want it over the whole thing. So let's go onto our mask with the smart filters. I'll switch to the brush tool. In fact, let's start off with the gradient tool, drawing black to white. So as you know, black will hide on a layer mask and white will reveal. Because I've got going black to transparent, if I start at the top and just drag this down over the mask, then you get the effect happening in full at the bottom here, but no effect at the top. You could also go to the brush tool. Let's have a nice big soft edge brush to low opacity, and you can paint the effect just where you want it. So I want his face visible. Let's paint it out up there, paint it out completely. And in fact, let's go to the alien as well and add a layer mask to him.
I was going to say, it reminds me of like the Twilight Zone or Outer Limits show.
It's that kind of thing. It's actually inspired by Star Trek, of course, who are always beaming down onto places. And so by adding the layer mask to the layer, then we can build up the transparency there. But having the mask on the smart filters means we can control exactly where those filters show and where they don't. And you can change your mind. I can go back, say, take off that pointillize. Let's go to this motion blur and give it a lot more blur. And maybe instead of the pointillize filter, we actually want to have something more like a solarize. That's quite cute. You can just see it on the side there. The point is, you can change your mind. You can go back, you can try different things out. You see the results instantly. You can try building them up on top of each other. You can hide them, you can show them. You never need to finally commit to any Photoshop effect.
Very nice.
There we go. We've hit the 1 hour bang on.
Perfect. Yeah, some
Any
very
questions?
very nice ones. Yeah. So in the UK, did they have something similar to like Twilight Zone or Outer Limits? I know that it was
We had the Twilight
Doctor
Zone.
Who. Which one?
We had the Twilight Zone. Yeah, I was brought up on Rod Serling.
Yeah.
And
Doctor Who
I
you had
remember
too.
many of the episodes so clearly. I mean, for people who've not watched the Twilight Zone, I mean, I don't know if they're still watchable now. They were in black and white. They'll probably seem very creaky, but they were half-hour shows of pure terror sometimes. You know, really
dark
shocking
ones for
material.
sure. So some nice compliments coming in. So Jaws says amazing. And Chris says nice presentation. And it looks like a lot of folks learned some new tricks today.
Excellent.
Michelle says thank you very much. Thank you so much. Very well presented. And Vivek says thank you. Great presentation. Yeah. And Andrea says this was great. Thank you for making my birthday. Sweet.
Very welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. Very creative, very fun, nice focus. So yeah, for sure, got to have you come back again. Yeah.
Great. Andrea, if you send Andrew your email address, I will send this image over to you. In fact, I'll stick you on the magazine cover as well.
Right. And Bobby says thanks. A lot of great info. Oh, and then Bob does ask a question that, am I correct that smart objects do add considerably to the image size?
Surprisingly, well, because they contain the original artwork, and even if you shrink it down to a small size, they still contain the original artwork. Given that, they don't add as much as you'd expect. So, no, you don't end up with enormous files. They add slightly because you've got bigger artwork in your document than you would we would normally. But I think the trick is when you bring a layer in, if you're going to make it into a smart object, bring it down to a reasonable size first. Don't bring something huge into a small document and then work with that.
Right, and don't add a smart object to every single layer, you know. So
no, but if you do, they don't make it unwieldy.
yeah.
But they do give you the chance to change your mind. So you're balancing,
Correct.
you know, a little bit of storage space against editability, and I'm going to go for editability every time.
Excellent. Yeah, and Thomas also says thank you. Used to be a great admin for the group, so thank you, Thomas, for being here.
Very welcome.
So yes, thanks, Steve. It was quite great, and thank you so much. Got to have you back again.
Certainly.
Whatever theme you want, you know. So
well, it's whatever theme they want. Ask your guys what they want to know about Photoshop, and we'll do it.
Take a poll in the group and see what they say. So.
I would love to have done a session on 3D Photoshop, which is a bit of a passion of mine. But they've just announced they're dropping 3D from Photoshop, and I am so disappointed.
I know, that was kind of strange news. Yeah. But people do like photo compositing a lot in the groups, so maybe you could do one on photo compositing.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Be delighted to.
Excellent. So once again, thanks so much, Steve. It was really great, and thanks everyone for being here. It was a great session, and as always, I will be posting the recording to the recording of the live video event, and always look for the top pin post in the groups. It'll be in the top pin post, and that's also where you will find any news, special events, and of course contests when we hit different milestones. So yeah, thanks everyone for being here. Have a wonderful weekend, and keep an eye on the groups. Thanks again, Steve.
Great. Take care.